Hello, I'm the Ultimate Fanboy, and October is finally upon us, which means it's time for some annual spooky-themed reviews. I've got a few lined up, but I think it's fitting to start with my personal favourite of these, and much like last year, it's another Leica classic, this time being the brilliant modern classic, Paranorman. I fucking love Paranorman, possibly even more than Leica's other films, and Leica's other films are pretty much masterpieces in my opinion, so that's saying something. There's quite a lot to unpack here with this delightfully undead film, so let's not waste any more time, let's take a ghostly look at Paranorman. So as far as stories go, Paranorman is very compelling. Norman Babcock is an 11-year-old with the ability to see and communicate with ghosts. Obviously few people in a sleepy and small-minded town believes him, which leads to him being an outcast that's ostracized and tormented by those around him. Things start to change when he starts to see other things, bad omens which seemingly indicate an oncoming supernatural threat. And after a run-in with his uncle, the only other person who's able to speak to the dead, he discovers that the legend of the witch's curse is actually real, and he's the only one capable of stopping it. Him and a small group of unlikely heroes forced together due mainly to circumstances, try and complete a ritual that will save the town from the ravages of a pack of zombies and the witch herself. But things aren't quite as they seem, and a mystery forms as who's the real monster starts to be called into question. On the surface, a character shut off from the world around them trying to solve a preternatural threat might not sound too original, and zombie stories are a dime a dozen, but the story is far, far from a retread. Original is definitely a word I'd use to describe it, as it's very hard to predict and didn't go in any of the directions I expected it to go in when I first watched it. It definitely subverts expectation in the best way, as it also has a purpose in the narrative beyond being just surprising. The outcast type story is one I can really relate to personally, and thus usually end up enjoying anyway, provided they are well executed, which this very much is, and makes the main character interesting enough, which it also does, but we'll get to that later. Speaking of the execution, that's really where the story shines. The film gets more and more intriguing the further and further it progresses, as more and more is revealed about the truth behind the witch's curse, the town's real history, and even its present. But it'll never get off track, keeping the focus very much on Norman and his place in the narrative, as well as the events unfolding largely from his perspective. Furthermore, it's executed in a way where the morality is centered rightly pertaining to the rest of the narrative. As bitterly authentic feeling and cynical as this film gets at points, the focus point is about seeing Norman overcome his adversity, both in the form of the actual threat and the town itself, as well as teaching those closest to Norman the lesson effectively. Unlike something like Chicken Little, where the focus is largely on figuratively beating down on the main character constantly in an attempt to make you feel sorry for them. In fact, in a lot of ways, this film feels like the Chicken Little story done right, at least on a fundamental level. Although I feel like drawing a connection between this film and Chicken Little feels very unfair to Paranorman, so I'll just move on. The mystery it creates is both interesting and ties into Norman's arc masterfully, as well as the overall theme of the dangers of indulging in negative emotions and a desire for vengeance. I dare not give away the twist here, but I will say that it's so much more effective than most twists of its nature, as it's really incredibly well sewn into the story, and it makes you see the entire film in a different light without affecting the entertainment value. In fact, it makes it more entertaining upon rewatches for the very same reason. I'm going to move on to the animation now, because otherwise I'll be talking about this for the entire video. And the animation is also something I could talk about endlessly because it's just so good. Yeah, that was a segue, sure. So the most notable thing is obviously that the animation is stop motion. And as stated before in my Coraline video, I absolutely adore stop motion. Actually, I'm not sure if that quite covers it. Stop motion is my all-time favourite style of animation, and I get unreasonably excited whenever a stop-motion film comes out, especially when it comes from such a talented animators as those at Leica. Paranorman is a perfect example of why. Its animation is some of the best stop-motion I've ever seen, being both incredibly fluid but also very expressive, without losing any of the stylized charm that stop-motion usually brings, while also including a monumentous amount of spookiness because, of course, 'tis the season after all. The time and effort put into the animation and design just bleeds into every visual aspect of the film, from the sets to the movement of the characters to the warping of reality around them, and especially just the unbelievable amount of attention to detail they clearly put into it. A really standout example of this film's design for me is the look of the characters. Each one has a memorable design, even the background or minor characters look very different from one another and have several distinguishing features that make them stick out in your mind individually. They look very much like they were drawn on paper first and then sculpted in a way that reflects that cartoonish style almost, without feeling too exaggerated to fit within the solid 3D environment. This is especially true for the zombies, which far removed from the generic image of the zombie, these zombies are very unique looking, each being distinct. The one that stands out to me the most is definitely this one, where the skin of his jaw actually detached and moves independently. That's such a small detail, but it's stuck with me since I first watched it, and they all have something like that that makes them stand out. The only nitpick I have about this film's animation is the use of CGI. Now, it's not just that CGI is used, there have been other stop motion films that utilize CGI that blend the two styles seamlessly, and I'm all for the combining of different animation styles. However, in this film, it looks a little bit out of place in some aspects, mainly the Witch's Storm. It doesn't look awful or anything, and it's still quite visually creative, it's just a tad out of place, but that really is a nitpick and doesn't hinder the film in any significant way. But how are the characters? Well, Norman Babcock being the main character appropriately gets the most focus, so let's talk about him first. He's clearly become disconnected from others and disillusioned with the quote-unquote normal world, but becomes relaxed and is perfectly content with himself and his abilities when in his natural environment, which he can control or at least understand, which again is very relatable for me personally, and I imagine a hell of a lot of other people who felt this way once or still do. This makes Norman a very identifiable character and makes his morose attitude all the more understandable and sympathetic. He doesn't let this consume him either. He keeps busy with his obsession with zombies and horror in general, which shows even further how much he really does embrace himself and his abilities to communicate with the dead, even when the world treats him like a freak. It certainly shows resilience, which makes it really easy to root for him, as he drives the plot forward, being the only one really trying to save the town. And more importantly, there's actually a reason to like him. He has something to him beyond just being a bland punching bag that's just asking to be turned into a Sunday roast. Okay, that's the last reference to that feature in this review, I swear. How about the other characters? Neil is Norman's best friend, really his only friend, and the only one that believes that he can talk to ghosts. He's also bullied for various reasons, but unlike Norman, Neil is very positive and sanguine, even in the face of adversity, and finds comfort in bonding with others rather than in his solitude like Norman. What I like about Neil is that he seems the most confident and has everything figured out as far as he himself is concerned. He's by no means the brightest spark, sure, but he knows how to stay happy without being a naive, one-dimensional pushover. I'm normally not the biggest fan of his character type, but I find him delightful, and a good contrast to Norman, even though neither of their approaches to life are presented as any more correct than the other. Alvin is a very stereotypical but very accurate bully character, being incredibly stupid and clearly masking his own insecurities by picking on easy targets. When I say stereotypical, I mean intentionally so, as this is the character type that's closest to real life. The one memorable thing about Alvin for me is that despite being voiced by Christopher Mintz-Plasse, he sounds uncannily like a Greg Sipes character. I don't know why, but all I hear when he talks is Kevin 11 from Alien Force mixed with Beast Boy, even though I know he's voiced by a different guy. Beyond that, he serves his purpose fine. Mitch and Courtney both serve their stereotypes well, also, with Courtney as the bird-brained, obnoxious teenage girl character type, constantly obsessed with boys and popularity, and Mitch is the meat-headed jock who barely seems to be aware of what's going on around him beyond general weirdness. They're both fine as well, not especially entertaining, but not as awful as those character types usually seem. I like how Courtney is the first one who stands up for Norman against the mob, as it shows she really does care for him and isn't a complete bitch. There's actually more to her. Not much more, but still something. Also, the most memorable thing about the two characters is the revelation about Mitch at the very end of the film. I don't want to give it away here, but it's foreshadowed throughout the film, and it's just hilarious once it hits. It's both tasteful given what it's about, being at the expense of Courtney rather than him. If you've seen the movie, you know what I mean. Also, +1 for not completely terrible representation. The jury members and judge serve as a cautionary tale about lashing out due to things we can't explain but perceive as dangerous anyway, and link well to the state of the town and its people in the modern day. That's all I really have to say about them. All the other characters are entertaining, if a bit one-note. So what is there to like about this movie beyond all of that? Where do I start? This is one of the most intriguing, intelligent, emotionally stirring animated movies to come out of the 2010s. The comedy is great, but used sparingly to allow for the gripping story and interesting mystery to take hold, allowing for the emotions as well as the laughs. The subversion of typical tropes and expectations is both brilliant for keeping it fresh, while also tying into the overarching theme of things not always being as they appear. The stand-ups to classic horror shows a deeper understanding of and love for the genre. It was clearly made as a love letter to zombie and monster movies, past and present, but even if you know nothing about classic monster movies, the rest of the jokes will still give you a chuckle. This movie is so captivating, every second something interesting is happening to keep you invested, especially so with the emotional moments, without it feeling too overwhelming like there's too much happening at once. Norman's journey and the devastating backstory of the witch's curse ties together so well and are both so powerful in their own right. The ultimate example of this for me is the scene near the end that I won't say too much about, but it's such a powerful, soul-wrenching moment that for me is up there with the first 10 minutes of Up, or the ending of Loving Vincent, or the boat scene from when Marnie was there. It's just a scene that stuck with me for so long and always feels as impactful no matter how many times I watch it. And that emotion spills into the rest of the film from that point. I'm not going to reveal anything more about it for fear of completely spoiling it. Any other criticisms I have of the film would be nitpicking. It's not only matches Coraline for me, but it exceeded it in every sense. If you have not watched it already, do yourself a favor and check it out. I legitimately can't recommend it enough. Although I guess that the review was a dead giveaway of that, pun intended. It's a perfect way to start the spookiest time of the year. With that said, I hope you enjoyed the video, and stay tuned as there's more ghoulish reviews on the way. See you in the next video. Rest in peace out.
Walking on the way to my Tuesday class with my Chucks and my new backpack. Forgot to do biology. Whoa! Gotta pick up the slack. Go up the stairs and I take him to a second flight. Turn to my left and I see that something's not right. It's a flesh-eating zombie. I think I want my mommy. I see him chewing and my stomach does a dry heave. Think that I'm about to leave, but then the creature lifts his sunken eyes and the zombie chases on. And the zombie chases on. And the zombie chases on. So I turn to run, but it's not too long. There's a zombie chasing me, moving his hands like, stumbling around like, got my hands up but not for too long. You know I'm trying to get away. Zombies and they're eating brains.